The porch light had been broken for 3 weeks, and nobody in that house noticed except me. I sat there most evenings, in the same chair, watching the driveway like it might tell me something the people inside wouldn't. I was 71 years old, and I had learned a long time ago that silence says more than most conversations ever will. That evening, silence was screaming. My son's car was in the driveway, packed. Suitcases, a cooler, a stack of pool floats tied to the roof rack like they were headed somewhere important, and they were. A cruise, $20,000, my son had mentioned once, almost bragging, like the number itself was the point. What he hadn't mentioned, not once, was that only 3 of the 4 people in that house were going. Through the kitchen window I could see my granddaughter, Mia, sitting alone at the table. 8 years old. Knees pulled up to her chest in the chair, the way she did when she was trying to make herself smaller than she already was. She wasn't crying. That was the part that hurt the most. She had already learned not to. I knocked on the door. My son, Danny, opened it with a duffel bag already over his shoulder. "Dad, hey, we're kind of in a rush, I can see that." I looked past him. "Where's Mia's bag?" He didn't answer right away. That told me everything. "She's staying with you this week, actually. We were going to call me the day you're leaving. It's complicated." "Dad, I have heard a lot of things called complicated in my life. Rent, taxes, a marriage falling apart. This wasn't complicated. This was a decision, made on purpose, by 2 grown adults about which one of their children deserved a vacation. His wife, Renee, came down the stairs with their son, Tyler, trailing behind her in a life jacket he clearly didn't need yet. Tyler was 6. Bio son. People in this family had started calling him lately, like it needed clarifying, like there was another kind. "Oh, hi, Robert," Renee said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Perfect timing, actually. Is it?" "Mia gets seasick," she said quickly. "Real bad. Last time we took her on the ferry to the island, she was sick the whole ride. We just didn't want to ruin it for her." I looked at Mia through the doorway. She wasn't looking at any of us. She was looking at her own hands. "She's 8, I said. "She doesn't need saving from a boat ride. She needs someone to ask her what she wants." "Dad, please don't do this right now." "Do what, Danny?" "Notice." Renee's smile had a practiced quality to it, the kind that came out for teachers and neighbors, and anyone who might ask questions later. "We already talked to her about it. She's fine with it. Aren't you, Mia?" Mia didn't answer. She just nodded. The smallest movement, the kind of nod a kid gives when they've learned that disagreeing costs more than it's worth. I felt something go quiet and cold inside my chest, not anger yet. Anger comes later, usually, after you've had time to understand exactly what happened. This was something else. Recognition, maybe. I had seen this shape before, a long time ago, in a different house, with different people, and I had promised myself I would never watch it happen again without saying something. "Get her bag," I said. "She's coming with me tonight." "Dad, we don't need." "I wasn't asking." Danny looked at Renee. Some silent negotiation passed between them, the kind married people have without words, and then he sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "Fine. We'll drop her stuff at your place on the way to the airport. You do that." I walked over to the car. Tyler was already buckled into his booster seat, headphones on, some cartoon glowing on a tablet propped against the window. He didn't look up. $8,000 of vacation, and he was already bored of it, and somewhere in that house was a little girl who would have given anything just to be asked. I found Mia still sitting at the kitchen table. I crouched down in front of her, the way I used to with Danny when he was small, and something was sitting heavy on him that he didn't have words for yet. "Hey, kiddo." She looked up. Her eyes were dry, but there was something behind them that no 8-year-old should carry. "You're not mad I'm not going?" she asked. The question nearly broke something in me. "Why would I be mad at you?" Tyler said. "I'm not really their kid, so it doesn't matter if I go or not. I have buried a wife. I have buried a brother. I built a life out of steel mill shifts and Sunday church, and a marriage that lasted 41 years before cancer took it from me too early. I thought I understood grief in most of its forms. I did not know grief could look like an 8-year-old girl explaining, calmly, without tears, why she didn't deserve to be included in her own family. "Come here," I said, and she did, and I held on to her a little too tight, a little too long, because I needed a second to get my voice steady before I said the next thing. "You listen to me. You are exactly as real as anybody in this house. More real, maybe, because you're the only one in it tonight who's telling the truth." She didn't understand that yet. I wasn't sure I fully understood it myself, but I meant it, and some part of her held on to it because her shoulders came down half an inch, the way they do when a kid finally feels like somebody is on their side. Danny came in 20 minutes later with her small backpack, already checking his watch. "We really gotta go, Dad. Flight's at 8. Go, then." "You're upset." "I'm not upset, Danny. I'm paying attention. There's a difference, and it's one you might want to learn before this gets more expensive than $20,000. He didn't ask what I meant by that. Maybe he thought I was just an old man talking in riddles on his porch. Maybe he didn't want to know. He kissed the top of Mia's head, a quick, distracted gesture, more habit than affection, and told her to be good for Grandpa. She said okay. She always said okay. That was the thing about Mia I would come to understand more and more over the following days. She had made herself very easy to leave behind, because somewhere along the way, she had learned that being difficult got you left behind faster. I stood on the porch and watched their car pull away, taillights disappearing down the street, Tyler's cartoon glow still visible in the back window until they turned the corner. Maya stood beside me, her backpack in one hand, looking at the empty driveway, like she was waiting for the car to come back and remember something. It didn't. "You hungry?" I asked her. "A little. I make a mean grilled cheese, nothing fancy, but it's good." She almost smiled. Almost. We went inside. I made the sandwiches. She ate at my kitchen table in my house, on a Tuesday night that should have belonged to a family vacation, and somewhere over the ocean her father and his wife and her brother were settling into first-class seats they'd paid $20,000 for. I didn't say anything else about it that night. I let her eat. I let her watch cartoons on my old television until she fell asleep on the couch, one hand still holding the edge of her backpack, like she thought someone might come take it from her too. But I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the only thing I have left worth offering. That night, sitting in my recliner watching my granddaughter sleep, something in me settled into a decision. I had spent my whole life being the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves, the one who kept the peace, even when peace cost more than it was worth. That was going to change, because 2 weeks later, a letter would arrive from my lawyer's office that would make my son wish he had thought a little harder about which child he decided was worth $20,000 and which one wasn't worth a phone call. 2 weeks is not a long time, but it is long enough to notice things you had been too busy, or too tired, or too willing to overlook to notice before. Maya stayed with me the whole week they were gone. By the third day, I understood something I hadn't fully let myself see before. This wasn't a one-time slight. This was a pattern, worn smooth from repetition. The way a stair gets worn down in the middle from years of the same feet walking over it the same way. She didn't ask about her parents. Not once. 8-year-olds ask about everything usually. "Where's my mom? When's my dad coming home? Can I call them?" Mia asked for none of it. She colored quietly at my kitchen table. She helped me water the tomatoes in the backyard without being asked. She said thank you for things that didn't require thanking, the way people do when they've learned that gratitude is a kind of insurance against being unwanted. "Does your mom read to you at night?" I asked her one evening, mostly to make conversation. "Tyler doesn't like being read to. He likes his tablet." A pause. "So we don't really do that anymore." "We." Not I. She had folded her own preferences into her brother's so completely that she didn't seem to remember she was allowed to have different ones. My daughter, Carol, called me that night. She lived 2 states away, married with kids of her own, but she and I talked most weeks. "How's Mia doing with all this?" she asked. "She's a good kid. Too good, maybe." "What do you mean?" I told her. The cruise. The seasickness excuse that didn't hold up to a single honest question. The way Mia had already learned to make herself invisible before anyone had the chance to overlook her. Carol went quiet on the other end of the line. "Dad, I didn't want to say anything before, because it wasn't really my business. But I noticed it too. Last Thanksgiving, Danny and Renee bought Tyler that whole race car set, the expensive one, and Mia got a coloring book from the drugstore. I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. You weren't. What are you going to do?" I hadn't fully answered that question for myself yet, but something had already started moving, quiet and patient, the way decisions do before you're ready to say them out loud. "I'm going to pay attention," I told her, "for once all the way to the end." Danny and Renee came home on Saturday, tan and relaxed, dragging suitcases full of souvenirs. Tyler ran straight to me holding a stuffed dolphin, talking fast about water slides and a magic show and ice cream every single night. Maya stood a little behind me, watching her brother's excitement land on nothing but air, because there was no one there whose job it was to be excited for her too, not in the same way. "Did you have fun with Grandpa?" Renee asked her, crouching down, voice syrupy in a way that struck me as more performance than warmth. "Yeah," Mia said. "We made grilled cheese." "That's nice, sweetie." "Sweetie." Not the same tone Renee used for Tyler, who got baby and my love, and a dozen other small softnesses I had started counting without meaning to. Danny pulled me aside while Renee unpacked. "Thanks for taking her, Dad. Really helped us out." "She's not a rental car, Danny. She's your daughter." His jaw tightened. "I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you've got 2 kids in that house, and only one of them knows what it feels like to matter." "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It isn't. That's exactly my point." He didn't have an answer for that. He rarely did, when I said things plainly, instead of letting him slide past them the way his mother, God rest her, used to let him slide past things too. I stayed for dinner. Tyler talked through most of it, about the cruise, about a magician who pulled a coin from his ear, about a kid he'd met in the kids' club who had a pool at his actual house. Mia ate quietly, pushing her peas around her plate, answering only when someone asked her something directly, which wasn't often. "So, Dad," Renee said, refilling her wine glass, "we were actually thinking about signing Tyler up for that travel soccer league, the one that goes to tournaments in other states." "That sounds expensive," I said. "It is, but he's really talented. His coach says he could go far with it." "And Mia, does she play anything?" Rennie blinked as if the question had come from a language she didn't quite speak. "She's not really the sporty type. Have you asked her?" "Dad." Danny's voice had an edge now. "I'm asking a simple question. Has anyone in this house asked this child what she wants to do, what she likes, what she's interested in? Or have we all just decided for her already?" The table went quiet. Mia's fork stopped moving. I left before dessert. I don't do well holding my tongue once I've started, and I didn't trust myself not to say something that would make things harder for Mia after I was gone. On the porch, Danny caught up with me. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." "Am I?" $20,000, Danny. "On a cruise. For half your family? We'll take her next time." "You said that about the ferry too." Renee told me herself. "He didn't have anything for that either." "I raised you better than this," I said. And it came out quieter than I meant it to, more tired than angry. "Your mother would have never let a child in her house feel like a guest in her own family." "Mom's not here anymore, Dad." "No, she's not." Which means somebody has to say the things she would have said. I guess that's me now. I drove home with the radio off, the way I do when I need to think, without anything competing for the space in my head. I kept seeing Mia's face at that dinner table, the careful way she'd learned to take up as little room as possible. I thought about my late wife, Evelyn, and what she used to say about people. "You can tell everything about a person's character," she'd say, "by watching how they treat the one who can't do anything for them in return." Danny and Renee had made their choice, and they'd made it more than once, in more ways than a cruise. What they didn't understand yet was that I had made a choice too. I had a lawyer, old friend Frank Delaney, from my days at the mill, when I'd needed help with Evelyn's estate after she passed. I'd been putting off updating my own will for 2 years, mostly out of laziness, partly because I hadn't wanted to think that hard about an ending. I thought about it now. That night at my kitchen table, under the same light where Mia had eaten her grilled cheese 2 weeks before, I wrote out notes for Frank in my own careful handwriting. Things I wanted changed, things I wanted protected, a name I wanted added, formally, permanently, in a way that couldn't be undone by a cruise or an excuse or a look that lasted half a second too long before someone decided a child wasn't worth including. I didn't tell Danny. I didn't tell Renee. Some things I had learned needed to be done quietly first, and explained loudly later, if they needed explaining at all. I called Frank's office first thing Monday morning and made an appointment for that Thursday. I had no idea, sitting there that Monday, just how much that appointment would end up changing. Not just my will, not just my money, everything. Thursday came slower than I wanted it to, the way important days always do when you've finally made up your mind about something. Frank Delaney's office hadn't changed much in 15 years. Same wood paneling, Same smell of old coffee and older paper. He'd handled Evelyn's estate when she passed, and before that, he'd worked the line with me for 11 years before he went back to school at 42 and became a lawyer, which I always said took more nerve than either of us had needed at the mill. Robert. He shook my hand, waved me into the chair across from his desk. It's been a while. What's going on? I laid it out for him, not just the cruise, everything. The coloring book at Thanksgiving, the soccer league conversation, the way Mia had learned to make herself small in a house that was supposed to be hers. Frank listened without interrupting, the way he always had, even back on the line when a man needed to talk something through before a shift. So what do you want to do? He said finally. I want to update my will. I want to set up something for Mia specifically. Something in her name, something that can't be touched or redirected or explained away by anybody else. A trust, if that's the right word. It's exactly the right word. Frank pulled out a legal pad. Talk to me about what you're thinking. We talked for an hour. I told him I wanted a portion of my estate, including the house Evelyn and I had spent 30 years paying off, placed into a trust for Mia, to be released to her at 18, with provisions for her education before that if it was needed. I wanted Danny and Renee to have no access to it, no ability to manage it on her behalf, no say in how or when it was used. That's going to raise some eyebrows in your family, Frank said, not unkindly. Just honest. Good, I said. Some eyebrows need raising. You sure about this, Robert? Once we start drafting, it gets real fast. I thought about Mia's face on that porch, watching a car pull away without her in it. I thought about her saying I'm not really their kid like it was a fact of nature, instead of a wound someone else had put on her. I've never been surer of anything, I said. Frank nodded and started writing. I didn't tell Danny what I'd done. Not yet, but something in me had shifted since that dinner, and I think he felt it, the way you feel weather changing before the first drop of rain hits. I stopped by that Saturday to drop off a book I'd bought for Mia, something age-appropriate about a girl who solves mysteries. The kind of story I thought she might like, if anyone ever gave her the chance to like things out loud. Renee answered the door, phone pressed to her ear, waving me in without really looking at me. I heard enough of her conversation to understand it wasn't meant for me. I know, but Danny's dad is being so weird about it. Ever since the cruise thing, he's acting like we committed a crime. No, I'm serious. He practically accused us at dinner. I don't know. Maybe we invite Mia next time, just to shut him up. Just to shut him up. Not because Mia deserved it. Not because she was their daughter. As a strategy. A way to manage me, the way you'd manage a difficult client or a demanding boss. I stood in that hallway longer than I should have, and something in my chest went very still and very clear. Renee finally noticed me and ended the call quickly, her smile snapping back into place like a mask she kept on a hook by the door. Robert, sorry. That was just my sister. How are you? I heard some of that, I said. There was no point pretending otherwise. Her face flickered, just for a second, before the smile reasserted itself. Oh, that was nothing. I was just venting. You were talking about inviting your own daughter on a family trip like it was a PR problem. That's not fair, Robert. I keep hearing that phrase from people in this family. That's not fair. Funny thing is, nobody ever seems to apply it to Mia. Danny came in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, and picked up on the tension immediately. The way people do when they've spent their whole life learning to read a room for danger. What's going on? Your father heard me on the phone, Renee said, folding her arms. Taken out of context. I heard you say you'd invite Mia next time just to shut me up, I said. There's not a lot of context that improves that. Danny looked at his wife. Something passed between them, and for the first time, I saw a crack in it, small but real. Renee, is that what you said? I was frustrated, Danny. Your dad has been hovering over every little thing we do since the cruise. I just wanted him off our backs. She's your daughter, Danny said, quieter now. Not a problem to manage. Oh, don't act like you weren't relieved to have a break from her attitude for a week. The room went silent. Even Danny looked like he wished the words hadn't been said, but they had, and they hung there, ugly and undeniable. Her attitude, I repeated slowly. She's 8 years old and quiet, and she thanks me for grilled cheese sandwiches like I'm doing her some kind of favor. What attitude are you talking about? Mia appeared in the hallway then, drawn by the raised voices the way kids always are, no matter how much you try to shield them from it. She stood very still, watching the three of us, reading the room the way she'd clearly had a lot of practice doing. Nobody said anything for a moment. Renee recovered first, plastering on that same practice smile. "Hey, sweetheart, we're just talking. Go finish your homework, okay?" Mia looked at me, not her parents, and something passed between us. She knew. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew that this conversation was about her, and that it wasn't good. She went back down the hall without a word. I left shortly after that. Danny walked me out, arms crossed against the evening chill. "Dad, I'm handling it. Are you?" Rennie didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Danny, I've known that woman 12 years. She meant exactly what she said. The only mistake she made was saying it where I could hear." He rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than his 38 years for a moment. "What do you want from me, Dad? You want me to leave my wife over one bad phone call? I want you to be Mia's father. That's all I've ever wanted. I want you to look at that little girl the way you look at Tyler, without having to remind yourself to do it. That's not fair. I love both my kids the same. Then why does only one of them believe it?" He didn't answer that. I hadn't expected him to. I drove home that night with my hands tight on the wheel, replaying Renee's words, just to shut him up. Not because it's right, because it's convenient. I thought about the papers sitting on Frank's desk, half-drafted, waiting for my signature. I had planned to take my time with it, to think it through carefully before finalizing anything. I stopped planning to take my time. My phone rang around 11. Carol, calling from 2 states away, her voice tight with something between anger and worry. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I don't think you're going to like it." "What's going on?" "I called Renee's sister last week just to catch up. We're still close from when Danny and Renee first got married. She mentioned something about Mia's adoption." "What about it?" Carol was quiet for a second too long. "Dad, Renee's sister said there's a life insurance policy on Mia that Danny and Renee took out 2 years ago right after the adoption finalized. A big one. She said Renee mentioned it once, joking, something about how it was smart planning, given everything." The kitchen went very quiet around me. "Given everything," I repeated. "Given what, exactly? I don't know, Dad. But it didn't sit right with me. Why would you need a big policy like that on an 8-year-old? And why would anyone joke about it?" I sat down slowly at my kitchen table, the same table where Mia had eaten her grilled cheese, the same table where I'd written my notes for Frank 2 weeks before. Something cold moved through me, a feeling I hadn't had since the worst days at the mill, when a piece of machinery would groan wrong just before it failed completely. "Carol," I said, "I need you to find out everything you can about that policy, quietly. Don't let Renee's sister know you're asking for a reason. Dad, you're scaring me." "I'm a little scared myself," I admitted, "but I'd rather know the truth than keep pretending I didn't hear what I just heard." I hung up the phone and sat alone in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, turning the pieces over in my mind. A child left behind on a vacation, a phone call about shutting me up, and now a life insurance policy nobody had mentioned, on the one child in that house who mattered least to the people who were supposed to protect her. I didn't sleep much that night, because if what Carol had heard was true, this wasn't just about a cruise anymore. I called Frank first thing Friday morning, before I'd even finished my coffee. "I need you to add something to what we're working on," I told him, "and I need you to help me find out something else, quietly." I told him about the insurance policy. Frank went quiet on the other end of the line, the kind of quiet that meant he was thinking like a lawyer instead of like an old friend. "Robert, I want to be careful here. A life insurance policy on a minor isn't automatically sinister. Parents take out policies on their kids sometimes. It's not common, but it happens. 2 years ago, right after the adoption finalized. And nobody in that house has mentioned it once. Not to me, not to Carol, not to anybody, until Renee's own sister let it slip like a joke." Frank exhaled slowly. "All right, I know a guy who does insurance investigations. I'll make a call. But Robert, I need you to understand, if this is nothing, if it's just an ordinary policy any responsible parent might take out, I don't want you burning your relationship with your son over a misunderstanding. And if it's not nothing, then we'll figure out what to do about it. One step at a time." Carol called back 2 days later, and I could hear in her voice before she even said anything that she'd learned something. "Dad, I talked to Renee's sister again, just casually, over coffee. She let a few more things slip. The policy's for $200,000. And Dad," She said Renee's been having money problems. Real problems. Some kind of business investment that went bad last year. Renee's been quietly asking family for loans for months. $200,000 on an 8-year-old girl's life. There's something else, Carol said, her voice dropping lower, like she didn't want to say it too loud even from 2 states away. The sister said Renee mentioned once that things would be a lot easier if it had been Tyler they'd adopted, and Mia who was theirs by blood. Like it would matter less. I had to sit down. Dad, are you there? I'm here, I said, though my voice didn't sound like my own. I'm here. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept thinking about Mia at my kitchen table, thanking me for grilled cheese sandwiches. I kept thinking about the way she'd learned to make herself small, to expect less, to accept whatever scraps of attention came her way without complaint. I had thought, at worst, that Danny and Renee were simply careless, thoughtless. The kind of parents who favored one child over another without fully realizing the damage they were doing. Now, I wasn't sure carelessness was the whole story. I called Frank back the next morning. I want everything moved faster, I told him. The trust, full custody consideration if it comes to that. I want to know what protections exist for a child in Mia's situation. If a parent's household turns out to be financially unstable or, God forbid, worse than that. Robert, that's a serious step. Are you accusing your son of something? I'm not accusing Danny of anything. I don't think Danny knows the full picture. But I am telling you that something is wrong in that house, and I am not going to wait around and find out the hard way what it is. I went to see Danny alone, timing it for when I knew Renee had her weekly hair appointment and Tyler had soccer practice. Mia was home, in her room, and Danny let me in looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Dad, if this is about the phone call again. It's not. Sit down. We need to talk. Something in my tone must have reached him because he sat. Danny, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Do you know anything about a life insurance policy on Mia? $200,000 taken out 2 years ago. His face changed. Confusion first. Genuine, I could see that much. Then something more complicated. There's a policy. Small one, I think. Renee handled all that paperwork after the adoption. Said it was standard. Something the adoption agency recommended for peace of mind. Standard policies for an 8-year-old don't usually run $200,000, Danny. And I don't think there's anything standard about a policy nobody mentions to the child's own grandfather. He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched something shift behind his eyes, some door he'd kept closed finally cracking open. Renee's been under a lot of stress, he said slowly. Money stuff. She doesn't like to talk about it. There was an investment, a friend of hers from college, some kind of business thing, and it went bad. Real bad. We lost a lot more than I told you. How much, Danny? Almost everything we had saved. That's part of why the cruise mattered so much to her. She said we needed something to feel normal again. I let that sit in the room for a moment before I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. Danny, has Renee ever said anything to you? Anything at all that made you uncomfortable about Mia? About the difference between her and Tyler? About what it would mean, financially, if something happened to one of your children versus the other? His face went pale. What are you asking me, Dad? I'm asking if you've ever felt unsafe in your own house. For your daughter. He didn't answer right away, and that silence told me more than any words could have. There was a night a few months ago, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Mia had a bad asthma flare. Bad one. We almost took her to the ER, and Renee, in the middle of it, while Mia was struggling to breathe, said something like, well, at least we're covered if something happens. I thought she was just being dark. Coping with stress, you know. Gallows humor. I didn't think. He couldn't finish the sentence. I found Mia in the kitchen a few minutes later, getting a glass of water, moving through her own house the way a guest moves through someone else's, careful not to make noise, not to take up space. Hey, kiddo. Hi, Grandpa. She smiled, small but real. Are you staying for dinner? Not tonight, sweetheart. I need to talk to your dad about some grown-up things. Her smile faded slightly, that old wariness returning, the look of a kid who'd learned that grown-up things usually meant something was about to get harder for her. I crouched down to her level, the way I had that first night on the driveway. I want you to know something, and I need you to remember it, okay? No matter what happens in the next little while, no matter what anybody says or does, you are safe. You are wanted, and I am not going anywhere. Do you understand me? She studied my face for a long moment, the way kids do when they're trying to figure out if an adult is telling the truth or just saying what sounds nice. Okay, she said finally, quietly. I believe you. That was enough for me. For now, I called Frank as soon as I got home. I talked to Danny, he confirmed enough. I want everything moving. The trust, finalized, immediately. And Frank, I want to know what it would take, legally, to petition for guardianship rights, or at minimum, protective oversight, if I can show a pattern of neglect and a credible safety concern. Robert, that's an enormous step. Are you prepared for what that does to your relationship with your son? I thought about Mia's face in that kitchen. I am not going anywhere. I already lost one child to indifference, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My brother, when we were young, our own father barely looked at him because he wasn't the firstborn. He spent his whole life believing he didn't matter, and it broke something in him that never healed. I am not going to watch that happen again in my own family and tell myself it wasn't my place to say something. Frank was quiet for a moment. All right, Robert, let's do this right. Come in Monday morning. We'll start drawing up everything, and I'll bring in a colleague who specializes in family law, just to make sure we're covering every base. Thank you, Frank. Don't thank me yet, he said. This is about to get complicated and painful for everyone. He wasn't wrong, because 2 days later, Renee would find out what I'd been doing, and what happened next would tear that family apart before it could ever be put back together the right way. Renee found out on a Tuesday, and she didn't find out quietly. She showed up at my house just after 6 in the evening, car door slamming hard enough that I heard it before I heard the knock. When I opened the door, her face had none of that practiced smile left in it. You went behind our backs. You talked to a lawyer about taking custody of my daughter. I talked to a lawyer about protecting my granddaughter. There's a difference. You have no right. No right at all. I have every right, Renee. I'm her grandfather. And when I hear a woman joke about insurance money while her daughter is struggling to breathe, I stop worrying about whether I have a right and start worrying about whether that child is safe. Her face went white, then red. Danny told you that. Danny told me the truth, finally. Something I imagine he's been needing to do for a long time. She stepped inside without being asked, which told me how far past politeness we already were. You don't understand anything about our finances, our stress, what it's like to almost lose everything and try to hold a family together. You're right, I don't fully understand your finances. What I understand is a little girl who thanks people for grilled cheese sandwiches like she's not sure she deserves them. I understand a policy nobody mentioned. I understand a phone call where you talked about inviting her somewhere just to shut me up. None of that requires a law degree to see clearly, Renee. It just requires paying attention. So what? You're going to take her from us? Break up this family because of a few things I said when I was stressed? I'm not trying to break up your family. I'm trying to make sure my granddaughter has somewhere safe to land if this family keeps breaking itself. Danny appeared then, having followed her over, standing in my kitchen doorway looking like a man caught between two collapsing walls. Rennie, we need to talk about this calmly. Calmly? Danny, your father is trying to take our daughter. He's not taking her. He's scared for her. So am I, now that I've had time to think about it. Rennie turned on him, disbelief written across her face. You're taking his side? I'm taking Mia's side, Danny said, and something in his voice had changed since I'd last heard it. Some backbone that had been missing before had found its way in. Renee, you joked about insurance money while our daughter couldn't breathe. That's not stress talking. That's something else, and I need you to hear how that sounds. Renee sat down heavily on my couch, the fight draining out of her all at once, replaced by something that looked almost like relief, the way people sometimes look when a secret they've been carrying finally gets set down in front of them. I never would have hurt her, she said quietly. I want you to know that. I was drowning, Danny. The business investment, then my mother's medical bills, then the mortgage. I was drowning, and somewhere in there I started thinking about numbers instead of people, and I hate myself for it, but I never would have hurt her. But you'd have let her keep believing she mattered less, I said. Every day, in 100 small ways, until she carried that belief into every relationship for the rest of her life. That's its own kind of harm, Renee. Just slower. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Maya had come home with Danny, and she stood in the kitchen doorway now, having clearly heard more than any child should have to hear about their own worth being weighed and measured by the adults meant to protect them. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, small voice cutting through the tension. Every adult in that room turned toward her at once, and I watched something break open in Renee's face, real and unguarded for the first time since I'd known her. "No, baby," Renee said, crossing the room, kneeling in front of her daughter. "No, you have never been in trouble, I have. I've done things wrong, and I need you to know that none of it was ever your fault. Not one bit of it." Mia looked uncertain, the way kids look when adults say things that don't yet match the years of evidence they've collected. "You left me off the cruise," she said quietly. "It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact laid down plainly the way only a child can manage." "I know," Renee said, and her voice cracked. "And I am so sorry. You should have been there. You should always be there." We talked for 2 more hours that night, the 4 of us, while Mia eventually fell asleep on my couch, worn out from a day too heavy for an 8-year-old's shoulders. I told them what I had decided, and I told them plainly, the way I believe important things should always be told. The trust for Mia would stand, regardless of what happened next. That wasn't a punishment. It was insurance of a different kind, a promise that no matter what happened in that house, she would never again be the child who got left behind. I told Renee I expected to see real change, not promises. Family counseling, financial honesty between her and Danny, and eventually, when she was old enough to understand, some form of honesty with Mia too, though not the parts that would only hurt her. And I told Danny that being a good father wasn't a thing you did once and then assumed would hold. It was every day, every choice, every time a decision came down to which child got noticed. 6 months is enough time to see whether change is real or just talk. I want to tell you it was easy. It wasn't. Renee started seeing a counselor about the money and what it had done to her thinking. Danny started showing up differently, asking Mia questions and actually waiting for the answers instead of moving past them. They took a trip that spring, a smaller one, closer to home, nothing like the cruise. All 4 of them went. I have a photograph Danny sent me from that trip. Mia standing between her parents at some lake, sunburned and laughing at something Tyler had said. Looking, for the first time in a long while, like a kid who believed she belonged exactly where she was standing. I still see Mia every week. She comes over on Sundays now, a standing tradition neither of us ever has to negotiate, and we make grilled cheese sandwiches together, her doing more of the work each time as she gets a little older, a little more sure of her own hands. Last Sunday, she asked me why I'd done all of it. The lawyer, the trust, standing up to her parents. I told her the truth. Because somebody should have done it for me once, a long time ago, and nobody did. I decided you weren't going to grow up the way I did, wondering if you mattered. You matter, Mia. You always did. Sometimes the people who are supposed to show you that forget how, for a while. That doesn't make it less true. She thought about that for a long moment, the way she does, and then she smiled. The whole, unguarded kind of smile I hadn't seen from her that first night on the driveway. "I know that now," she said. "You taught me. If there's one thing I'd want anyone watching this to take with them, it's this. Pay attention to the quiet ones, the children who thank you too easily, the ones who make themselves small so they take up less room in a house that should have room enough for all of them. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's a porch light left on, a grilled cheese sandwich on a Tuesday night, and one person willing to say, out loud, that a child's worth was never up for debate. That's the only inheritance that ever really mattered, and it's the one I'm proudest to leave behind."